Before we get to all of today's chest-bursting fun, I want to thank Magic Spoon for sponsoring today's video. I've been looking to change up my snacking habits lately, so when I've been craving a certain something, I have quite often been reaching for Pulse of Magic Spoon, and specifically my new favorite flavor, Blueberry Muffin. Magic Spoon's been a great choice for me due to the fact that they have 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 to 5 net grams of carbs in each serving. The asterisk has to do with that Honey Nut has 1 gram of sugar. You can build your own variety box with all the different flavors, or even give the new cereal bars a chomp, which are peanut butter and cocoa, my favorite, and cookies and cream, cause honestly, you should just treat yourself. To do such, check out the link in the description below and use the code McMuscles to get $5 off your order today. Thanks again to Magic Spoon for the support, and without further ado, let's start the show. Welcome back to another gestating, pulsating, and frustrating episode of What Happened, the retrospective pop culture media show that's so pure, you just have to admire it. Now, for those of you that clicked too fast and didn't see the full title, this week we're venturing deep into the slimy industrial hallways of Alien Resurrection, the video game. In the land of film, fans blame 20th Century Fox for ruining one of the greatest sci-fi protagonists of all time as they attempted to squeeze more blood from an already empty stone. 20th Century Fox let French auteur Jean-Pierre Jeunet's wild ideas go unchecked, and scriptwriter Joss Whedon blamed everybody but himself because, well, that's Joss. Now, I know what you're thinking. Alien Resurrection came out in 1997, and you don't even recall an Alien game coming out that year. Well, guess what? You're right. This is because the game faced massive development hurdles and only ended up releasing towards the end of some 3 years later. Though the movie had its share of production issues, they absolutely paled in comparison to those of its video game adaptation. Like, it's really not even close. So step out of your incubation tube and strap on your spare metallic arm things. It's time to find out what happened to Alien Resurrection. The game!
Must be a chick thing.
In the mid-90s, movie studios opening their own video game publishing arms were all the rage, and Fox Interactive was no different from the rest. Founded in 1994, they, as you'd expect, published titles based on self-owned properties like The Tick, The Pagemaster, and the family favorite, Die Hard Trilogy. They also expanded outside of that sphere with original games like 1997's Croc, Legend of the Gobos, which is incredibly important to our story today. A Fox Interactive producer by the name of Gary Shainwald was buddies with the founder of Argonaut Software, Jez San, and it was this close relationship that helped bring about the publishing deal for Croc. Croc's development was going well, and so when a proposal for a new Alien game came down the pike, Argonaut was an easy choice. The new game would be based on the upcoming Alien film, but at that time, the team had not been given any pre-production material or even what the movie's final title was. Most of the staff had just come off the similarly named but totally unrelated game Alien Odyssey, and instead worked on the engine and tools in the interim, with the goal of creating a top-down action game. Designer Tim Moss had recently become obsessed with the cult classic PS1 shooter Loaded, and had chosen that as the main inspiration for Alien in these early days. With no immediate clarification from Fox, it was initially assumed that they were making something based on Alien vs. Predator, perhaps due to rumors of a film based on that premise being in production all throughout the 90s. When Fox then finally provided a working version of the script, the top-down design Argonaut had started actually slotted in quite nicely. This early draft of the script took place on a vessel that was described as more of a housing block than a ship, featuring dozens upon dozens of floors, which would facilitate plenty of frantic level-based mayhem. Fox was pleased with the direction, and gave the official green light for the game to burst onto the PlayStation, PC, and Saturn in time for the film's 1997 premiere. This was quite a reasonable development schedule at the time, since they had begun work in early '96, but it wasn't too long before things became very unreasonable. In fact, it was pretty much immediate. Right out of the gate, Fox was all like, "Oh, hey, Argonaut, can I ask a personal favor? Can you make a completely separate video game that will be featured in the movie?" Yeah, Whedon wrote something about an in-universe video game, so we kind of need that. Like now. Development on Alien Resurrection was then briefly reined in a little because this fictional in-universe game dubbed Atom Zone had to be ready in time for the movie's shooting schedule, which was obviously Fox's priority. Atom Zone was apparently completed as per the director's specifications in just 3 days, but it was a mad dash to get it done in time. In issue 230 of Retro Gamer magazine, Argonaut founder Jez San recalled, "There wasn't a deal for the game that appeared in the movie. I'm sure we signed a release, but there wasn't a contract and we didn't get paid for it. Gary Sheenwald insisted we got a screen credit though, which was all we got. We did quite a bit of work on it, effectively for free. Originally we had the whole Atom Zone game playable, but the director needed a very specific set of occurrences in the game and for it to be reproducible on demand. In the end, we captured a demo so that it wasn't playable, but was exactly what the director required." There were also some soft plans to possibly include Atom Zone as a playable bonus bundled alongside Resurrection, but as we'll see, those plans were quickly cast aside for a number of reasons we'll get into. By the start of 1997, Fox had provided a plethora of resources from the movie for Argonaut to use, perhaps a bit too many. They received boxes and boxes of raw daily footage, just everything the crew had shot, which amounted to hours of completely useless material. Argonaut staff combed through all this video to timestamp anything that would help bring the world of the game closer to that of the movie, which naturally ate up way more working hours than it should have. Lead artist Mike Wilson recalls there was a cabinet full of VHS tapes, which, to be honest, were too boring to sit through. Another issue is that the film itself was constantly getting its tone and structure changed at a moment's notice, with new scenes getting added or cut on a pretty regular basis. This then led to some frustration as Argonaut struggled to catch up with the source material's ever-evolving nature. But evolving would be one thing they'd need to get used to, as something was happening in the game industry at large that would have a profound impact on the project. The team found that the loaded style design they were targeting was years behind ambitious fully 3D titles like Tomb Raider, which made them realize that Alien Resurrection was going to be a bit antiquated the day it would release. This led to the game changing directions into a third-person action game in the middle of its development. Then Argonaut boss Jez San corroborated this info in that same issue of Retro Gamer, saying, "What they originally asked us to do, we did, and then we decided to throw it all away and start again from scratch." This meant that the old version, which was somewhere around 60% complete, would essentially be thrown out. The project would then be restarted, though they would opt to use the engine one of their other teams had developed to power Croc, which would have at least given the Alien Resurrection team a leg up. Good old Croc. Nothing beats that. Tim Moss stated in an interview with Eurogamer, "We were hopeful we could reuse a lot of the work we did, but that just wasn't possible. That's why so many people started to get cheesed off with it and went to do something else. It was just redoing stuff. Once you've already done something, you don't want to do it again." According to the same story, around 30% of the game staff would leave the project following this shakeup. The team iterated on this new design for months, making more realistic models for the main cast and paying close attention to Ripley 8. Remember Ripley 8, the clone of Ripley that somehow exists even though she died hundreds of years in the past? Someone help me, I'm actually starting to remember Alien Resurrection. Oh god, the baby!
Hey, I thought you were dead. Yeah, I get that a lot.
Now, even though visually the game was looking better and more accurate to the film, there was one tiny issue. The staff at Argonaut started to realize that their game, and the movie it was based on, was a swirling black hole of a disaster waiting to happen. Fox had invited the team out to a private screening of Alien Resurrection, which, after they watched it, only managed to cause emotional damage to the lot of them. Once they returned to work, most of them became worried that the game they'd been slaving for years over was now based on a critical and box office bomb. The staff members who worked on Atom Zone, however, were the most devastated of all. As it turns out, that tiny game they had crunched on to meet the deadline appeared for less than 8 seconds in the finished film. Nonetheless, the game puttered on, with staff members coming and going in the wake of the film's release. Argonaut were still committed to making the best of the situation, but it was no doubt difficult to get your team to fall in love with working on a middling game based on a less than middling and already released movie. Fox, maybe feeling that they needed to get this game onto the path of making money, redoubled their marketing, trying to position it like, yeah, the movie may not have been... forget about that, wait till you play the game, we've been working on it for quite a while. And so they would release multiple trailers composed of clips of outdated builds and old CGI footage. They were still pushing it as a multi-platform title too, even though zero work had been done on anything other than the PlayStation version. The various interviews sourced in the Eurogamer article list off a litany of issues that the devs were grappling with. The enemy count had to be kept ludicrously low to maintain a decent frame rate. Alien AI behavior was as basic as it could get, with Xenos slowly waddling in and taking swipes at the player. Pop-in was rampant on enemies, and the game's draw distance was painfully small out of necessity to help the game's performance. And Alien Resurrection was apparently not scary at all. Well, not in the way it was supposed to be, anyhow. This is where, thankfully, an aha moment occurred. In the third-person build, they had designed certain elements like crawling through vents to have a specific camera movement that would tighten in, which would then allow the player to control the movement and camera freely from the first person. Designers and testers at Argonaut realized this would open up whole other avenues. Limiting the game's field of view meant enemies were now more terrifying, environments more claustrophobic, and that the game could actually stave off some of the aforementioned tech issues. Argonaut had never developed a first-person shooter before, so it's not surprising this shift only came about by chance, but once it did, they grabbed the alien by its weird horn tubes. You know what I'm saying. Fortunately, this didn't call for the team to throw out all their work again, as explained by Jez San in Retro Gamer. Technically, the new perspective wasn't a huge change, as we had a general purpose 3D engine, so the changes were mostly in the level designs. I think the main decision to move it to first person was so you have stuff jump out at you, which felt more, well, alien-like. Resurrection did see a swath of cuts to support these changes and the rush to finally get it out the door, like several levels based on scenes from old screenplays being tossed in the bin, along with full VO for the main characters, which would have been provided by sound-alikes, also destined for the cutting room floor. I'm fairly certain Ron Perlman, Winona Ryder, and especially Sigourney Weaver had less than zero interest in returning to their roles. In the last few months of development, designers and QA testers at Argonaut put their heads together and devised one more major change, which at the time was seen as rather inconspicuous. When using the DualShock controller, players would be able to pivot their point of view with the right stick and move their character with the left stick. I guess you could call this bizarre setup, I don't know, dual analog? They also threw some mouse controls in there to please Grunkle Derek. After weeks of testing, Argonaut felt that this dual analog setup was ideal, and within a very short time period their testers became so familiar with it, they were apparently able to clear the game using just the standard pistol. This even misled some staff members into thinking the game might have been too easy, which certainly wasn't what critics and fans would think. Unfortunately, when Alien Resurrection finally did hatch in October of 2000 after 4 years in development and almost 3 years after the film's debut, critics did not find the control scheme ideal and, as mentioned before, scoffed at the notion that it was too easy. Massive difficulty spikes via alien ambushes combined with limited health was a criticism lobbied against it, something Argonaut did not anticipate as their testers had become so adept it wasn't seen as an issue. GameSpot famously said, "The game's control setup is its most terrifying element, and almost unplayably difficult to control and unreasonably hard to enjoy," awarding Resurrection a 4.7 out of 10. Despite these harsh critiques, it still maintains a 61 average on Metacritic to this very day. Ultimately, the middling reviews and fan apathy was certainly not helped by being associated with the film, and really wasn't helped by the debut of Rebellion's much more satisfying and feature-rich Aliens vs. Predator just a year prior.
Game over, man. It's game over.
Looking back at it now, Alien Resurrection is seen as something of a technical showpiece for the PlayStation, and one that more or less introduced the world to the de facto console FPS control scheme, a distinction that Halo would take credit for over a year later. Despite some fans now appreciating the game's atmosphere, graphics, and forward-thinking controls, Jez Sun does not look upon the experience all that fondly, saying to Retro Gamer, "The whole Alien game turned out to be a horrendous abortion. The changes we made were for the betterment of the game, but it caused huge delays that cost us a fortune that we never earned back." It's really a shame, because if the desire to chase Tomb Raider $signs hadn't taken over, and if Argonaut had instead somehow honed in on the FPS perspective much earlier, there was no telling how good Alien Resurrection, the game, could have wound up being. Fox Interactive would eventually be sold off to Vivendi Universal in 2003. Argonaut Games outlasted them until 2005, with their final game being EA's Catwoman.
Ain't that a kick in the head?
Not surprisingly, the studio would find itself in dire straits soon after that release, with almost all of the staff being laid off. It's not all doom and gloom, however. The vast majority of those that were let go shacked up with a newly formed English studio by the name of Rocksteady, proving that Argonaut's talent for making games based on licensed IP did not die, but was rather resurrected. And if you out there know of any other games or movies screaming in the depths of space completely unheard, do let me know in the comments below, or take a hypersleep ride over to my Twitter. See you next time, and thanks for watching!